Okay, welcome everybody to a class on Tanya in the mini-series about Kavana, about the intentions we have in our mitzvahs and how it changes things. So we spoke about how Kavana, in spite of the fact that mitzvahs and the physical world and the physical actions is what God's ultimate purpose of creation was, but part of that is to have kavana, to have intention when you are doing the mitzvah, to do the mitzvah as a means to connect to God, and that illuminates the mitzvah. It called it like just as a soul, when it animates the body, it makes the body alive, meaning the body has a life force. We say the body is from dust. The body is from, in of itself is inanimate. But when it has the soul in life, not only is the soul present, which is obviously a more, a more spiritual, lively thing, but it makes the body alive as well. I mean, the body becomes fused with the soul life force. When a mitzvah, a body, is done with kavana, intention of doing it as a means to connect to the commander, to the creator, then it livens the mitzvah, the body, to also have a certain, a greater intensity. And therefore, and the bottom line is that just as we know, what's God's purpose? Well, the Torah tells us the purpose is the physical world. But God wanted the physical world to be done with physical mitzvahs as an enhancer, ideally to do them with kavana. So there shouldn't just be more, robotic or just like things done, but they should be infused with higher faculties, because that makes a greater dwelling for God. It's not just you're doing what he says, but you have no, there's none of your higher faculties animating it, or your more abstract faculties connecting to God. Just your hands are doing it. You're putting on tefillin, you're lighting candles. God wants the kavanah to be part of it as well. But as I mentioned before, that kavanah is like a zero. You could have 20 zeros. It's still zero. If you put a 1 before it, then it becomes, the zeros enhance the 1. What does this mean? It's got to be a physical mitzvah, because that's what God ultimately wants. But once you do the mitzvah, 1, and you have kavana, doing it as a way to connect to God, to bring up some more higher faculties into it, then it's like a 0 after it. More kavana, more zeros, and so on. So I hope that is a good summary. So in the practical Tanya, we're doing chapter 39. We already started it, but here's the flow. That the title of the class tonight is where do your intentions go? Meaning, if you have kavana, where is it propelling the mitzvah to? Is it just that there's more emotions involved? And as we started last week, there are levels of kavana. And just to sum it, what we said was that just like you have animals and you have human beings. Animals have instinct. They could have intelligence as well, but ultimately it's about, self-perpetuation and all that comes from their instinct. It's instinctive intelligence and or emotions. A human being, one of the explanations of why we're created in God's image is that we have free choice, and we have a intellectual ability for the abstract. Therefore, when you do kavana, when you have kavana, meaning you have kavana that you thought about God, meaning you learned a good piece of Tanya before prayer, let's say. We just, as a aside, for those of you that, many of you probably over the years, you've got the Chayenu magazine, right? The digest, the daily, and it's all available online on chabad.org/daily study. We study a daily portion of Tanya. And in the daily, an annual cycle. So the daily portion of Tanya is, it starts actually the second book of Tanya, which is all about God being part of and God's relationship with creation. A little more mystical. So if it interests you to have more of this intellectual understanding, you can go to chabad.org/daily study. I think yesterday they started the cycle, the second book, Shar Yichud V'Emunah, the gate of unity and belief and faith, of understanding God's oneness. The Practical Tanya actually has a book on it. It's very good, volume 2. Anyways, so if you study some of that, the reason I mentioned, if you study some of that, and you think about God's oneness, that is an intellectually generated kavana, right? You're the kavana in this text, in this context of Tanya, is the intention to connect to the divine, to connect to God. That's not easy because we don't always want to connect to God. We usually want to connect to pleasure. So there's different ways to want to connect to God. One of them is intellectual contemplation about God's unity. And this is what, in essence, all the Hasidism is about. A lot of it is. And you develop a certain, you appreciate it, and you want to connect to God. That's intellectual kavanah, intellectually generated kavanah. But let's say you're not at such a high level, or you're not such a contemplator. We can always fall back. Kavanah, by the way, is, just to say, it's basically love and fear, right? It's I want to connect, love, attraction to God. Fear is fear of disconnect. So it's the same idea. So you could have kavanah from instinctive love and fear. Every Jew, we say, is as an heir to a certain level of love, of innate love and fear to God. When I say fear, I mean awe, I mean respect, I don't mean, or fear of disconnect, I don't mean fear of being zapped. But every Jew has this natural love and fear, and you can awaken that through thinking that you have that. We spoke earlier in Tanya, when you think that you would be willing to give your life for God, you remind yourself that you have it in you. And therefore you can bring out, without much intellectual work, a more instinctive love and fear, kavana. And he says that That's an example of an animal versus a human being. An animal has instinct. So your kavanah from your instinctive love, obviously it's a different level than an animal, but the fact that you have instinctive love, that is like that's equivalent to an animal. I mean, relative to the higher type of kavanah, intellectual, abstract, intellectual generated kavanah, that's more of a human being. It's a higher level. We mentioned that angels are referred to. We said actually yesterday, 2 days ago, by the Shavuos Torah reading, that Ezekiel's, in the Haftorah was Ezekiel's, Yecheskel's prophecy, and he had a prophecy with angels. And it references here that he saw beasts, chayos, and behemos, beasts and animals. There's a face by God's chariot. There's a face of a lion, an eagle, an ox, and those are different types of angels serving God. Why are they equivalent to animals? Angels are very lofty beings. So what's the answer? It's because it's instinctive. Angels, yeah, they're spiritual beings, but they're instinctive spiritual beings. Versus human beings we can go beyond our instinct using our intellect. Okay, now one of the things it talks about in chapter 39 is where your intention goes to. So I want to go as a preface. There are 4 worlds, and I'm actually going to pull it up. Give me a moment, I'm going to pull it up on the screen. A moment. Okay. So as you see here, Chabad.org, you can just type in the 4 worlds, Chabad.org, and you'll read more about it. But there are many worlds in Kabbalah, but there are 4 general categories. And as you will see, that these 4 columns, they're all levels, they're all parallel to each other. So first let's start with God's name. Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey. The Yud says, and this is why this is broken down into 4 worlds, because everything is God. So the name represents the flow into 4 categories. The Yud represents the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation. And that is categorized with Chachma, with wisdom. We'll talk about that in a minute. And in short, they give the little explanation, initial inspiration. The next letter is Hey. Hey is, if you think about a Yud is really just a dot. There's a crown, but really it's just a dot, showing a certain level of pristine oneness, and there's no dimensions. It's just a dot. The Hey is already, I don't have it written down here, I've depicted, but a Hey, if you can picture a Hey, In your mind, there's vertical and horizontal and a little extra leg. What you're seeing is an idea of expansion. And that is the world of Bria. That is where God's oneness is now broadened or stretched out, given some type of form. And that is parallel in the creative process, the idea of Bina, understanding, which is the broadening of the concept. There's the eureka, there's the allowing yourself to, like, when you first you're thinking of a problem, you can't find a solution. And then you figure out a creative solution, but you don't have it clear yet. You just know there's something that you're now touching. That's chachma. Bina is that you now you start, fleshing it out, the broadening of the concept. The next world is, the next letter is Vav, Yud, Hey, then Vav. And that is the third world of Yetzira, formation. At the top of this name, above it all is obviously, not here, but above it all is, God's essence, no name. The name is sort of the bringing it downward, so there's other. It can be revealed to others. So the Vav, the next level is the Vav. The Vav is a line down. It shows even greater descent from God's oneness to create even further vistas. And that's the world of Yetzira, formation. And in the Sfirot, in the 10 Sfirot, that is Chesed through Yesod. That is the 6. Those are the 6 emotions, a lot of the creative process. That's internal. Emotional involvement in plans. And then you have Hey, the final letter, it's a second Hey, it's a greater broadening, which is the world of action. That is paralleling the Sphira, the character trait of God, Malchut, God's kingship. And that is building a project. Okay. So just to go over it again, the idea of 4 worlds is in our little understanding is it parallels the Sfirot, which in very simple terms is how you get from a new idea that's outside of you to bring it inside of you, to broaden it, create emotions from it, and then to build it. That's how it's inside the person. Man is created in the image of God. And that, some of the Kabbalists say that means the Sfirot. Yes.
So is the idea that the idea, the emanation always comes from outside of a person? It doesn't come from within us?
It's a very good question. Where do ideas come from? I took a question. Let's talk about that. Where do new ideas come from? Do we have, meaning, don't they at some point come from, we see it elsewhere, or we have information that we build upon from elsewhere?
Yeah, I think we're responding to, it's a response to our exterior experience.
So we have, seriously, you agree that ideas are from outside?
No, it seems like the idea is coming from the inside. It's how we're responding to what's exterior to us, right?
If I teach you a new art form or a new mathematics,
I see what you mean. Gotcha.
Right? It's you have to, this process of sort of being very humble,
right,
to receive it, but then you connect it to yourself. You connect what you do know,
Right.
and you make it yours. I give you a new idea, you do it further. So the stage one is bittul, is humility, self-nullification to the idea. But then you got to make it yours. So you do use the tools and the concepts you know already to either, to at least have some to have some relationship towards it. This next stage is the sphere, the chesed, the emotional part where you're finding it really very relevant, and very because you can't just a human being is not just intellect. We're intellect and emotion. That's how we relate to things. So the more you're processing it, you can bring it further into emotion. But then you go do it. Actually, if you look in Kabbalah, the famous chart of the sphirot and the body. So the mind is the three chachma, bina, das, the parts of the brain, and then chesed, gevura, tferes. I imagine chesed is the heart or part of the heart, and then malchus, the final is speech in the person. I mean, it could be his action as well, but speech is already a level of malchus for two reasons. Malchus actually means kingship, means leadership. Leadership is, I guess, exalted, a good leader. What is that? What's that trait? Is it love? Is it fear? Is it what internal process? It's much more of a controlling some external leadership. It's basically taking what you have and giving it or guiding others with it. So Malchut is the idea of, it has nothing of its own. It's like the moon. It's a reflector of the sun. It's nothing of itself. Its whole goal is to now take whatever the emotions and the chachma, the stages before, right? If you see the, like the idea of the Malchus is it's taking all this from before and then it's bringing it further to outside itself. And speech is the first concept what is speech? Speech is, it's only useful when if you're the only person in the world, would speech be useful? Would you need to speak? It's really, speech is only meant for others to get your ideas, to get your desires, ideas, and emotions. Okay. So, having said that, let's talk a little bit how this makes sense about your kavana. Souls, tzaddikim, righteous people who have divine consciousness. It says they are accessing the world of Bria. These worlds aren't like, Pluto, Jupiter, they're not like higher up. They're right here. They're just different dimensions right here. We just perceive the physical, the action. Souls of people, of tzaddikim, souls that are God conscious, their department or their souls are coming from this world of Bria, which is, again, parallel to God's level of creating the understanding of godliness, which is not the highest level, because the highest level is the chachma, where it's just it's a flash. it's like blink and you miss it, in the sense of when you have that initial eureka idea that you're sort of, you're like, there's a tremendous humility to this new bit of information, but then instantaneously you broaden it, which is bina. So imagine there's God's oneness and God trying to create worlds. So God is going down the pipeline here. Chachma, he's making God's aware, he's making a world or a consciousness that is the level of Chachma, very high level. That's the world of Atzilut. It's almost non-existent. As a matter of fact, the word Atzilut comes from the root word Eitzel. Eitzel means nearby. It's a world that's adjacent to God. It's not far away. It's an extension. It's an emanation. But then the world, then God packages his himself and his and a consciousness of God lower into a more broadening and to a concept. There's more dimension. Even further, you go further, you broaden into a world of emotions, which emotions are even more, felt or more autonomous. You're going from, the ray of the sun inside the sun to being further away from the orb of the sun. The further away it goes, the more it more distinct it is in of itself. The closer it is to the sun, or inside the sun, it's there, but it's not. It's nothing in of itself. It's nullified in its source. And the further you go down, you get more autonomous, more independent other, and of a world, in these four worlds. So the souls of tzaddikim, of righteous people who contemplate, they're accessing or living on a level of bria, of a world of understanding. Angels, or when we do a mitzvah out of instinct or emotion, instinctive emotion, which we say we all have innate love and fear of God, then we're in the world of Yetzirah, our souls. And by the way, the souls, angels inhabit this world. In a sense, they're living on that plane of reality, a world where God is very much realized in an emotional way, in an emotional way, meaning a more subjective way, but it's still very intense. And that's why, interesting, Tanya is not really a classical book of Kabbalah. It doesn't want to impress you with spiritual jargon and spiritual, it's a practical guide to, as it says, the Tanya is based on one verse in the title page. What was the verse? Moshe tells the Jews, Ki karav elecha hadavar ma'od beficha b'vavcha la'aseh. For this matter is very close to you to do it. In your heart, it's very near to you. The Torah, the mitzvah is very near to you. It's very doable to live a life of integration to Torah and mitzvahs in your heart, and even to do it, in your heart to do it. And part of the reason it's very doable to live a life, not just to do it, but to have love and fear, kavanah we're talking about. Moshe said it's near. Near, it seems very hard, is because you have that instinctive love and fear, and you can access it at all times. And it's enough love and fear to have kavanah. Granted, it's not the level of a higher level of tzaddik, of bria. It's not the what am I doing? Why is it not?
Hey, Yitzi, can you copy that URL and put it in the chat section?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. So when you do mitzvahs with instinct and emotions, you're inhabiting the world of Yetzirah, which by the way angels do. And he mentions in the note here, that's not like such a bad thing. Angels are very intense servants of God. So don't feel like if you don't have intellectual, clarity, emotions are also a very powerful way. And those are also considered kavana. Mentions also that even the rest of us, we're not like tzaddikim. We don't necessarily have that contemplative, emotional, bria level of emotion, of intellect that generates our kavana. But on Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, all the worlds are elevated a rung, and even the ordinary souls ascend. It says to the channel from the lower Gan Eden to the higher Garden of Eden. What is so it makes an interesting point. Let's say a person never was a great contemplator. So they obviously lived, and at best they lived their life. They reached the world of Yetzirah. Their mitzvahs inhabited the world of Yetzirah. But even so, the soul, I guess, after it leaves the body, and even while it's in, on Shabbos and Yom Tov and Chodesh, it goes up. Because why? Since the end of the day, we have free will. So even if angels don't have free will, so they're instinctive, they have love and fear, and it's emotion. We, in addition to our emotions, instinctive love and fear, we have free will. So for us to do the right thing, we have to subdue the klipa, the Yetzer Hara. As you mentioned before, when we choose good over evil, even if it's at a lower level of emotional kavana, we do have a comparison to tzaddikim, who the righteous who are who the righteous who have intellectual appreciation, because just like they connect to God with their intellect with free choice, when we do it, our mitzvahs, even just more instinctive or emotional, it's also with free choice. There is a certain comparison, and when the world is elevated on a higher plane, which is Shabbos and Yom Tov and Rosh Chodesh, then we go along for that. Now, all the above discussion is about the soul, meaning the soul, does it go to Bria, to the level of intellect? Does it go to the level of Yetzirah, that world, emotion? But the mitzvahs themselves, your mitzvahs, they actually go to the highest world. So, because the mitzvahs that you do essentially are embodiment of God's will, and the spheroids, which we said before is these God's creative process, is in every mitzvah. So it's whenever you do a mitzvah, you're absorbed in a very high level. because in a sense you're absorbed in God's body, so to speak, because the mitzvah is an extension of God's limbs. So that's just a side that, mitzvahs always are out of body experience. One of the reasons why more intellect is greater as far as closeness to God's oneness is because of objectivity. The problem with emotion is that it's very subjective, which means there's more self. Intellect is more objective. You can make room for ideas that are very different, that you even argue with, or are different than you. So intellect is more, by definition, more objective and more, therefore, makes room for a greater truth than self. But that is, we spoke about till now, is the worlds of Yitzir and Bria. But then there's, we said, the highest world, Atzilut. And that is something that only tzaddikim, great, the very few righteous can live on that level. It says, as a matter of fact, that most of us cannot live on that level because that's a level above comprehension, right? Chachma is not wisdom. It's really translated as the portal to the information outside of you. It's the glimmer that connects you to stuff outside of you. The eureka spark. So a creation, an angel, a person, even a tzaddik, has to be at one of these lower levels of Bria, Yesira, Asiya, because those worlds are created with comprehension. There's some dimension that you can grasp, whether intellectually or emotionally. If we live in Atzilus, it would be below the fuse. Therefore, who can live on such a level? Only very, very few great tzaddikim. Why? They actually connect to God on a chachma level, which is, again, it's sort of like a twilight zone. It's like it's you're getting it, but you're getting that you don't get it. There's much more out there. So to live on that level is very rare for the very unique tzaddik. So what's interesting is, even though we said before that the word of bina, understanding, is objective, so it's making room for a truth outside yourself, still, as we mentioned before, it's the tools, your tools of understanding are, you understand, they all live with one other. Question is, which one are you living in? What is your reality?
So, Yitzi, I'm just curious. So, like, if your reality is Chachma,
which is unique,
how is that? If Chachma never translates to Bina, how is it Chachma?
Oh, wait.
How is any of this stuff anything if not without the other part?
So you're saying if you have Chachma, the spark that connects you to the infinite above,
right?
But you don't go further, right? You don't go further, so you're stuck there. So you have no sense of self.
Well, you have no sense of understanding of what that spark is.
You have no tools. You're just like in a perpetual state of awe and wonder.
Right.
You're never processing or relating it to how any sense of you can relate to it, because you're not at the relation part. Bina is where you relate to the idea. Chachma is where Chachma is how you relate to the outside. Bina is how you relate it inside. The problem is once you start relating to the inside, that gets back to a sense of self, an ego, as sublime as it might be, and for certain people.
I guess the question I'm asking is if you have Chachma without any kind of processing, how are you, how, it seems to me you're no different than an angel without any free thinking, because you have to have the thinking process to be able to recognize, the wisdom.
Right.
And I'm not sure I understand how, if you don't have that awareness of it, how then it's even there.
I think the sense would be, look, I can't say I live at this level or know anybody, but he gives an example here, being a good listener or a bad listener. A good listener is active listening, really not bringing your self into, you're really making room for the information. You're not relating it to your experience. Oh, this reminds me of this. You're really hearing the person. At a certain point, a therapist, right, a professional would say, okay, this is, let me see if I get what you're saying. And then they can give some advice as they, in their toolkit. But before you get there, there's an idea of being an active listener, a good listener. I mean, even then there's some level of processing, granted. But I think the difference is that he says, imagine what would happen if you get stuck, so to speak, in Chachma, never progressing to the question, what does this mean to me? What would happen? You'd be in a state of constant amazement and wonder at the universe. You'd lose your rigid sense of self and see your role as a force put here for a greater cause. Your fears would drop away because loss and misfortune are all bound up with your self-concept. Your thought about God wouldn't be, what can God do for me? But rather, I'm nothing but the power of God within me. While you can't really know what Atzilus is like until you get there, answer your question, the Tanya gives us one simple guidepost here. It's about transcending the Bina and reaching a consciousness of Chachma. And that's what it says that Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, they were chariots. It refers to this, they lived at a level of Chachma.
So in Chachma, there is no self.
There's no self. It's
you're like tapped in.
You're tapped in, exactly. And and you're not even, there's no, your tools are irrelevant. I mean, I don't think it's like you can do it without, you graduate. The more you understand, the more you get to what you don't understand. Then you go further and further. Meaning it says in the one of the great Kabbalists says, the epitome of knowledge is knowing that you don't know.
Okay.
In God, right? Like, but that's easy to say, but you have to learn a lot about God and all that. Then say, and there's more than that, and as much as that, there's beyond,
Okay, so here, let me ask you this. I'm going to try to figure out how to phrase it right. You have said many times before that the difference between like certain other religions and Judaism is the idea is you're not supposed to go meditate on top of some mountain somewhere. You're supposed to apply that understanding, that knowledge, wisdom to the world around us to make it better, right? So it seems like this, taken all together, these four worlds, it seems like they're building towards the actual project that comes out of it. So I'm just, when you say like the highest level is being at Chachma, it seems like, well, Chachma is not really, if you're tapped in, you're not really giving anything to the physical world, right? You're up on a mountain, just like tapped in. Does that make sense?
So I want to just preface, I might say that, but there's another part to that equation, is that you're not only supposed to stay at the mountain.
Right.
There is a time in the day when you're supposed to be at the metaphorical mountain, prayer. You're not supposed to be doing charity in middle of prayer. You're supposed to do charity before and after, but not in middle, because prayer has its own function. Is you're trying to connect to the infinite,
I see.
and that's actually fits very well in with this binary of Judaism's ultimately about action, that's what we said. But God wants it to be a illuminated action, which means you have kavanah. So that's why it's important that you start the day with prayer, and ideally with Hasidism before, which is to sort of raise your consciousness as much as you can, for whatever level we're all at. And you get a little bit of clarity, but then you have to, with tears in your eyes, close the prayer book, close the Talmud after you learn a little bit after, and go change the world, or go do physical life that involves a lot of mitzvahs. But it's not a contradiction that you raise yourself up to a level of, I really want to get close to God, and that with our perspective, those tools, that's more of an intellectual / emotional type of thing. That's why most other religions, they get stuck there. It's more sublime to meditate or to be intellectual or to have because it feels more harmonious, more connected to the bigger picture. But Judaism says after you do that, you then you do physical mitzvahs. So, and that's why it's not like you're cursed. You're not the level of the tzaddik and chachma. You have your function. I have my function. The tzaddik has his function, his or her function. Together we change not just the physical world, but we're utilizing all parts of creation, including the spiritual worlds. If that makes sense. He mentions that even though, of course, we cannot be like levels of the patriarch's chariots, but we have times in the day when we get little access cards to Atzilus. It says when we pray the Amida, it says at some level your soul is having more access to Atzilus, to a level of Chachma, because it's what Amida is you're standing in front of the king. There's a level of right. Chachma is batal. Chachma, by the way, if you take the letters Chachma and you switch them around like a mallegram or something, it's called. It's koyach ma. Chachma is the same as koyach, the power of ma, of what is this? The power of the faculty of what is this? Amazement, curiosity. It's Chachma is not really wisdom or intellect. It's actually the part of the brain that's the receiver for what's outside of it. When you bow down in the middle of Shmona of the Amida, it's a level of it's akin at some level to the level of Atzilus. It's special moments of inspiration, but that is not the typical tzaddik or anybody's level, of course. It's the level of Atzilus. So now we stated above that the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah. That if you look at the reward of the mitzvah, you can know the mitzvah, because the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah, right? So if you get the reward, let's talk about the reward and work backwards. What is the mitzvah? So when you look wherever your kavanah brings your spiritual destination, whether it's again, is your mitzvah taking you to Yetzirah, instinctive? Is it taking you to Bria? Is it at times even taking you to Atzilut? So you can know if So that's okay. That whatever the case is, whether you're doing it with Yetzira or Bria, whatever that's good. Let's say you don't have kavana. You're not motivated by kavana. You didn't even consent. You just sort of did it without thinking. You didn't even use your instinctive love. In that case, your service or your soul's level, it remains in the world of separateness, meaning the superficial dimension of the world, that it doesn't have the ability to unite with God's sfirot, even the lower level, because all these worlds, even the lowest world, we didn't even talk the lowest. The Asiya is actually a spiritual world of action, but all of them have the sfirot. I mean, it's God like going through them, working through them.
Mommy. Hey.
Hey, Mendel, you're joining us for Tanya. So, it says it quotes here from the Alter Rebbe. If you learn without kavana the breath of your speech and all the powers of your animal soul from klipas nogo, they escape the physical world of four elements, but they remain in the chambers and repositories of the superficial dimension, very far from the light of God's face. This is a little Kabbalistic, but we'll just get through it. This means even if your worship was not completely inauthentic, for some ulterior motive, God forbid, rather you did it in a, habitual mitzvahs. You're just, your custom. So it escapes the world, but it doesn't really get absorbed to these higher worlds. So but it wasn't totally authentic. What do you mean it wasn't authentic? Is that it's impossible to have authentic service of God without emotions. You can't have a relationship. I saw a really great. I was listening to a Tanya class by Rabbi Naftali Silverberg. He has a very good, in-depth class, and he says, imagine if someone said, someone's looking to get married, and they say, I have a perfect shidduch for you, a perfect girl for you. She's going to be a devoted wife and everything, right? And really help you and be a partner for you. But one thing. What's the one thing? She won't like you. But she's such a good character, she's not going to ever let that show. She'll do good. She'll always do right by you. But she just doesn't happen to like you. Would anybody sign up for that? Of course not. So too, you can do mitzvahs, but if there's no feeling, to at least even a basic innate level of feeling for God in them, so as we say, those, even if it's, you're not doing it for a bad reason or ulterior motive, but you can't say you're really connecting to God. Just like you can't have a relationship with someone who doesn't like you. Then he says, if your observance is completely inauthentic, you're doing it for an ulterior motive, like you're studying Torah to become renowned as a scholar. Then what happens is the ulterior motive, which is from Klipas Noga, becomes enmeshed with your Torah, and the Torah becomes exiled. Unfortunately, that your Torah that you learn becomes temporarily exiled in the Klipa, in the level of shell. Meaning, if you don't have emotion, fine, it doesn't rise up to merge with God, but at least it doesn't, add to klipa, to obscurity of God, actions that are hiding in God's presence. When you learn Torah for an ulterior motive, you're using holy stuff, but to obscure God's presence, to make more ego. Of course, that is until you do teshuvah. This is temporarily. When you do teshuvah retroactively, it makes all the mitzvahs and Torah you do, it brings them back to be more authentic. Because when you return to God, your Torah returns with you. That's why the sage always says, a person should always do Torah and mitzvahs, even if it's inauthentic, because and eventually you'll become authentic. And once you become authentic, it retroactively transforms all your inauthenticity. And whether in this incarnation or the next, you're going to do teshuvah. And then all the mitzvahs you did, all the Torah you learned, even if it was done for the wrong reason, worst case scenario, then it becomes rehabilitated. But back to what we were saying in our case, that's we're talking, you do mitzvahs because you do mitzvahs. If your worship is neutral, whether inauthentic, neither authentic, not inauthentic, not ulterior motive, just not, then it's easy. You don't need teshuvah, because as soon as you go learn, you start learning with a little bit of feeling, a little bit of kavana, then the times you learned or the mitzvahs without kavana goes right away. You don't have to teshuvah is a much more intense rehabilitation. If you just did something blasé or out of habit, when you do something later on with kavana, it actually brings the thing along, all the neutral times along. So clearly, when a person, when the Talmud discusses, when it says it's a contradiction, it says in some place, it says a person who studies for ulterior motives is better, he shouldn't have been born. Another place in the Talmud, it says that always study, even not for the sake of heaven, because eventually you'll come to the sake of heaven. Seems to be a contradiction. So they say it depends. Is it just for something to become a scholar, or is it to become arrogant and to negate another person's opinion? So the bottom line says, even the cases where there's ulterior motive, and for sure the ones that are neutral, always engage, always do mitzvahs, always learn Torah, even if you're not feeling you're 100% perfect or authentic, because eventually you're going to be authentic, and then all that you won't have wasted time, because all the times you tried, even not perfect, even authentic, will become rehabilitated. So in very short, we spoke a lot about kavana, and we spoke about how if you have, instinctive emotion, love and fear of God, and that powers your mitzvahs, you get to one level called Yitzira. You're accessing that sense of reality, that world of reality. If you can get to a higher level, intellectually generated level of appreciation from God, and that motivates you, that's Bria, even higher. The great ones live at a level of Chachma, but that's not typical. That's maybe every so often for us. Or by our connection, one of the ideas of being a chassid of a Rebbe in Kabbalistic terms is, a Rebbe is a soul of Atzilus, is living on the world of Atzilus. The Rebbe is here but not here, a conscious of Chachma. And us followers, by connecting and being sort of the feet of the Rebbe, the limbs, the extension, we have access to some of that inspiration. And but even if you do mitzvahs with no kavana, it's sort of, we said, it reaches out of the world, but it's in a sort of a superficial dimension of spiritual reality. But when you eventually do have kavana, it'll bring that along. So always do, never wait for epiphanies. You do, you try, you meditate, you don't meditate, you do, and you keep on trying, and eventually you will have a more intellectual, generated kavana, and that'll bring everything you did along with it. Okay, and that ends tonight's class.
Thank you, Rabbi Yitzi.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. All the best, everybody.